Let's talk now to Mark Regev. Mark is a spokesman for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's also a former Israel ambassador to the United Kingdom. Mr. Regev, thank you for joining us on The World Tonight. We've had this UN resolution calling tonight for a humanitarian truce. It passed despite the opposition of Israel. I mean, it is a worrying point, isn't it, in terms of your foreign policy, that despite the brutal killings of 3 weeks ago, the kidnapping and holding of hostages, you've not been able to translate that into support.
The truth is the General Assembly of the United Nations automatically passes anti-Israel resolutions with large majorities. Unfortunately, that's par for the course. There's institutional discrimination against Israel at the United Nations. So this does not come as a surprise.
So you don't think in any way it represents or gives a sense of public opinion in all those countries that voted for a humanitarian truce?
I want to tell you that since this crisis started, we've had world leaders come to Israel to express solidarity and support, from the American president to the British prime minister to the German chancellor to the French president. We've had the Romanian prime minister, the Czech prime minister, the Austrian chancellor. And add to that all the phone calls. Israel has been given large international support. It maybe doesn't translate into UN votes at the General Assembly, but the support we've received is also almost without precedent.
Are you worried that some of that support may be softening the longer this goes on?
We understand that. We understand the politics. We understand the diplomacy involved. But I think there is an understanding that Israel cannot and should not have to go back to the status quo that existed before this terrible, murderous terrorist attack that we experienced on October 7th.
You know the criticism. Sorry to interrupt. You know the criticism of that argument, that the status quo was one created by Israel itself. It kind of sealed Gaza off effectively. It said to Israelis, "You're secure, you're safe, as long as we keep the pressure, the security pressure on." And yet it turned out to be wrong. The Prime Minister turned out to be wrong. No. These people got over the border into Israel, and they stayed for hours. And apparently the Israel security services were not able to stop that. Isn't that the sense of weakness that you're now having to deal with within Israel, that is why you have had to take this approach?
First of all, you're correct when you say that what happened on October 7th was a disaster for Israel. Our intelligence didn't pick up the information about the coming attack. We weren't ready for it. They caught us by surprise, and 1,400 of our people were murdered, and another 200 more. 229 are currently being held hostage in Gaza. So it's not a moment of national pride. It was a disaster for my country. Our people were butchered. Our people were massacred. Our people were burnt alive. It was a terrible, terrible day, an atrocity that's been called the biggest act of terrorism since 9/11. But that's exactly why we can't go back to the status quo. There were many people who told us Hamas is governing 2.2 million people in the Gaza Strip. They've been in power for 16 years. The responsibilities of government force them to become more pragmatic, more moderate. But we've seen that is not the case.
I get that point. I just wanted to pick up, finally, if I may, with you, the poll in Regev newspaper today. 49% of Israelis interviewed saying it would be better to wait before beginning a large-scale ground offensive. 29% disagree with that. But a week earlier, those saying it would be better to wait, taking that position, 65% had backed ground invasions, drop of about 16% in a week. In a sense, you can't leave it much longer, can you? And there's a danger, isn't there? You've kind of bombarded the place for nearly 3 weeks. Lots of people have been moved and had to move. They say those inside say people are living in terrible conditions as a result. But you haven't advanced your objective of eliminating Hamas, that you're in danger of the worst of all possible worlds.
Well, once again, our military pressure on Hamas is only just started, and we'll be beefing it up. And our goal remains unchanged. And we will achieve that goal because we have no choice but to achieve that goal. And that is the destruction of Hamas's military machine in Gaza and the end of its political control of the Gaza Strip. Now, that's a far-reaching goal. It might take longer than people expected, but we will achieve it.
Will it take longer than the Israeli public opinion is willing to tolerate, though? That's the question.
I believe, and I spoke to some of our soldiers who are going into combat. They know that this is a difficult fight. They know that we are facing a formidable and barbaric enemy. Hamas, we have no illusions about what the dangers we face. But it must be understood, not taking on Hamas is to accept the status quo, and the status quo has proven to be terrible. The status quo has proven to be for Israelis a massacre of our people. And if we just go for some quick fix, if we don't seriously deal with this problem, we'll be back to square one and our people will be massacred again.
Mark Regev.